our speaker coming up. And so before we get into her presentation, I'd like to share a few details about today's presentation, today's foregathering, and some housekeeping. So first of all, because this is a new recording, I have to say, introduce myself. I am Charles de Vilmorin. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Linked Senior. And, we at Linked Senior started this campaign called Old People Are Cool about 6 years ago for a number of reasons. One of them is, we believe that everybody's cool, including the older adults that we're privileged to work with, but also not big fans of this segregation based on age. And as many of you are aware by now, we started this initiative called Activity Strong at the beginning of COVID, the pandemic, to not only acknowledge the amazing work of all of you professionals, activity and life enrichment directors, but also with the idea of empowering you with tools. And I'm very excited actually with what Dr. Stelter is going to share with us today, because some of these tools that we started last year, like the resident engagement scoring, we have a new version of it, and we're very excited. Sorry, Dr. Stelter, I'm kind of taking your thunder away, but we have very exciting things coming up with today's presentation. So again, tools to empower you. And the idea is really to elevate the profession. Linked Senior, the company behind all of these wonderful things, is a company that I co-founded 14 years ago, and essentially we are a resident engagement platform for senior living. So we're very fortunate to work with amazing organizations like the one shown on the screen here that range from lifetime communities to senior living, so really assisted living and memory care, and obviously long-term care communities like nursing homes and so on. We're touching almost 45,000 lives today, and we have a 97% renewal rate. And essentially, the only thing we do is help you and your organization elevate resident engagement. At its core, fundamental, we are a resident engagement company, and we happen to provide technology, we happen to provide education, like these wonderful webinars that we're able to put on, like the ones today. And something that's very important for us is augment the quantity and the quality of human touch. We want you professionals to be able to spend more meaningful time with the elders and the residents and so on and so on. The way our service works is simply we have an app that helps you augment and save time every day and empower any of your team members to engage residents. We have a background management tool, like a dashboard, to help elevate resident engagement and use data really to enable this idea of interdisciplinary team and use really data to understand where we are in resident engagement. And then the last thing about our service is that we have a wonderful team of resident engagement specialists. Think of them as a customer success team that really partner with you every day to help understand what are your goals and how to, again, elevate resident engagement with you, I should say. Our work, obviously I'm a little biased, but I like to say that our work is amazing, but we're not the only one to say that. We are actually an evidence-based platform where our work was published in a peer-reviewed journal, and we've seen some amazing outcomes, like the ones that you can see on this particular screen. So the one outcome that we're very proud of, as we're still navigating, unfortunately, some of the social restriction associated to COVID, is partnering with providers to help fight social isolation and increase resident well-being. With that being said, let me jump into housekeeping reminders for today's session, and then I'll introduce us to our speakers. So up to 3 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and or NCCDPC credits are available today. To earn the credits, you need to attend the full session, so as few as 1 and as many as 3 sessions today. To receive these CEUs, you need to fill out the CEU survey no later than midnight on Monday, September 27th, so that we can process your certificate of attendance and again issue up to 3 hours of these CEUs. Please note that due to the high numbers of attendees, we will be sending out these by email throughout the week of September 27th, and no later than Friday, October 4th by the end of the day. If you have any questions, please reach out to us anytime. We have a new email address for that purpose, webinars with an s@linksenior.com. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access it on our website later if you want to come back to it, or obviously if you want to share it with other professionals. This is being streamed right now through Zoom and maybe Facebook, but one note, if it is on Facebook Live, please note that we can only give CUs if you are on the Zoom platform. One note about the Zoom platform, as you saw from the first session, the chat is amazing. The chat is really cool. There's a high sense of community and engagement. For us as speakers and moderators, we cannot track all the chat being delivered. So if you have a specific question for today's presenter, the speakers, please use the Q&A, and Megan and I will do our best to surface that question if it's not addressed during the presentation at the end of the presentation. One last comment about these. If you want to chat to everybody, please select the panelist and attendee setting in the drop-down. By default, it's only sending it to the speakers. If you send it to the speakers, we'll get it, but the rest of the audience won't. So again, if you want to engage with your peers and share ideas like many of you have done on the first session, please make sure to select panelists and attendees. And two last comments that I personally feel are very important is one, please have fun, right? We're here for you. We're here to educate you, but we're also here to help you kind of build a sense of community and have fun and meet people. And this can be done on Facebook, on our chat, or just by following up with us. And as I said before, I just want also to pause and in the name of everyone at Link Senior and all of our partners, we want to take the time to thank you for what you do every single day. What you do every single day by showing up at work and taking the time to engage the elder is truly essential, and it's amazing. And we want to thank you, obviously, for doing this throughout your career, but especially in the middle of the pandemic. So with that being said, let me take a minute to invite you further to, I was talking about having fun and meeting new people. At 4 p.m., we're going to transition from Zoom webinar to another Zoom meeting where Brian Rife of NCAP is going to lead a game called the Virtual Escape Room. I don't know if you've done the one in the real life. It is possible to actually do it virtually. Apparently, it's amazing. And we're going to have, I think, almost 20 rooms where in order to escape from the room, you need to collaborate and have fun and come up with new ideas. This is going to be hosted again by Brian Rife and Don Worsley from NCAP. And to kind of add a little bit of fun, Brian came up with an exclusive activity-strong cocktail recipe called the Quarantini, right? So feel free to take a minute. We're not going to start right away at 4. If you want to take some time to assemble that or assemble anything else, please take the time. And again, welcome now to this presentation and welcome to today's happy hour. So with that being said, let me introduce you very quickly to our amazing speakers for our second session. So this session, again, is our second session of the day of this virtual foregathering. The activity is strong, virtual foregathering in partnership with NAP, NCAP, and Activity Connection, Today's session is called Data-Driven Resident Engagement for Clinical and Financial Outcome. And so I'm extremely excited to introduce Dr. Jennifer Stelter and Alisa Tagg. And Dr. Stelter, I'll let you take it away from here, and I'll move the slide for you. Just let me know when you want to. And just so that you have the whole attention, I'll take off my camera, my video. But again, just give me the holder and I'll change the presentation for you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Charles. I don't know how I'm going to follow up between Julia and Melanie's presentation. It was so dynamic. I got to catch the end of it. And so I'm going to try and keep you guys' attention when we talk about data and how this can affect our clinical and financial outcomes. So hopefully it'll be just as fun as the last presentation. I'll try my best. So Charles, if you want to go ahead and advance the slides. All right. And Charles, are you able to give me the slides to advance by chance?
Yeah, let me do that. Well, first, let me find how to do it.
If you can't, that's okay too.
Okay. I think Megan would need to do that. Megan, do you think you could do that?
Yes, Jennifer.
Oh, no, here we go. Sorry, I got it. Here we go. There you go.
Right, wonderful. All right, so today, Alyssa and I are going to be talking about data and how it really can drive clinical and financial outcomes. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me see. There we go. Alyssa, if you just want to pop on so people can see your beautiful face. I know a lot of people know who you are, but just so they can say hello. So as you guys know, Alyssa is from NAP, and she just does a wonderful job at supporting all of you, and of course the activity world and senior living. And then myself, I've been in a number of presentations. I am the Director of Product Research at Link Senior, as well as the Chief Engagement Officer for the Resident Engagement Institute. And so I have some other things going on as well. I am CEO of my own company, NeuroEssence. I'm an adjunct professor at IB Tech Community College and a staff psychologist at Allow Wellness too. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So I want to talk a little bit about, I was a speaker at our June summit, and I want to kind of pull together some of the information that I shared there and how it relates to what we're going to talk about today. So at the June summit, we talked about what are some challenges that we're facing as a field, right? And part of it is that there's really no agreed upon benchmarks or performed trend analyses in senior living resident engagement. And so unfortunately, what happens is when we don't have these benchmarks that we agree upon that we can shoot for, or we have, we're not having these trend analyses performed, oftentimes resident engagements is seen as it's nice to have or it's fun. And really, we all know there's so much more to that, right? And so when we talk about activities being nice to have or fun, where does it need to go? And so we talk about, sure, we need to have activities in place because it's regulatory requirement, not only of course by CMS standards, but by state standards as well. But what's not being measured is how it's impacting our residents' health or how it's contributing to the return on investment. Why aren't we doing this, right? Because we all know that it does impact our residents' health and our patients' health. We do know that it's a return on investment. We just haven't proven it through research and data, right? And post-pandemic, unfortunately, activities is one of the departments that's getting hit the hardest. When we talk about that, is we do realize that across the board, organizations are seeing budget cuts in a lot of departments. But we do know with the activities, we continue to see that loss as well. We may have budget cuts in staffing. We may have a decrease in our budget with regards to what we use for purchasing supplies or holding events or things like that. And so it's of course impacted a lot of departments, but it has really impacted the activities department as well. And so when we haven't yet proven, right, through data, through research, that activities is health impacting, that activities is a contributor to return on investment, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see those cuts. So where are opportunities? So we really should be redefining and creating a new era of resident engagement, one that's based on benchmarks, that is derived from empirical research and our clinical expertise. We should be able to be moving from activities are nice to have or fun to they're really clinically necessary, and they are an ROI, a return on investment. So let's prove it through research opportunities and have that data to be able to present to organizational owners and to operators, to our administrators, to our executive directors, right? Let's show them the data that activities is necessary. This can also then lead to, of course, an increase in budget and staffing, and hopefully some other wonderful things for us down the road. I want to share with you that Link Senior has already started this venture back in 2017, and Charles actually shared this in the slides in between the last presentation and this one. But this was a collaboration between Link Senior and the organizations you see listed there. It was a year-long study with a sample of 256 seniors, and they looked at the impact of technology within resident engagement. So there was an experimental group, and then there was a control group as well. And they tested over functioning level, they looked at mood state, they looked at cognitive level, and they really had outstanding outcomes. So if you see there, it shows that when we improve resident engagement, that it can really impact quality, right? So in this study, we saw a 20% decrease in antipsychotic use, an 18% decrease in aggressive behaviors, 20% increase in social engagement, and 3% increase in cognitive performance. Now, although that may seem low, that's actually really good because there's a lot of studies that will, of course, try to negate whether, when we interact with individuals in a way that enhances their executive functioning skills, that there's little to no movement in their cognitive performance, but we were able to show that here. So in 2017, Link Senior early on has been trying to prove that activities are not just nice to have, that they're clinically necessary. So as many of you know, and as Charles mentioned, we developed the Resident Engagement Institute earlier this year during the summer, and we did our first announcement at the June summit. And so really part of the initiative, amongst a lot of other parts of the Institute, is to continue doing research to show that activities is clinically necessary and it impacts financial outcomes as well. And so within this, we are really looking to show how if we were to implement this standardized process that I talked about in June called API, assess, plan, implement, evaluate, if we implement this standard of practice, which would include social prescription, which we'll talk about here in a second, that it really can impact clinical outcomes. So what we want to show, above and beyond what Charles and the team showed in 2017, we want to show that activities does have impact on fall reduction, right? Lower return to hospitalization rates and increased length of stay from a clinical perspective, right? We want to be able to show decreases in depression, lower psychotropic use, and so much more. On the financial side, we want to be able to show, again, low return to hospitalization rates, right? That keeps that census where it needs to be, increasing length of stay if you're, of course, in assisted living. What does this equate to, right? Between the clinical outcomes and what we're seeing here from a census perspective, right? We could see increase in quality ratings, improvements in 5-star ratings, enhancement in marketing competitiveness, boost in referrals, increase the number of move-ins, and enhancing your satisfaction ratings, both for residents, families, and for staff, right? So that's our return on investment. So what we want to do is take the research within the Resident Engagement Institute and continue to show that activities is clinically and financially necessary to an organization's success. This is the API process that I talked about in June, but I want to review it briefly here. We want to be able to show that if the standard of practice is implemented within an organization, that we can really show these outcomes that I just spoke about. This API process is nothing new to the healthcare industry, and it actually is really well used in the recreational industry, but we want to be able to see it more in the activity professional realm, right? We're doing it every day. We just want to put a structured process to it and show what those outcomes are through the evaluation process, which is the final phase. I want to focus on the plan component because we did focus a lot in the June summit on social prescription, right? So during the plan process is where the social prescription entity will come into play, where when you take the assessment information of the individual, right, when we look at their preferences, their likes, their dislikes, right, their functional ability, and you pull that all together, what would that plan look like? So meaning, would they have their preferences met? And how long should we engage them for? And with what, right? So if there was a process or a standard practice that can do that for us, where we can implement the social prescription plan, then we can measure it, right? And we measure it after we implement it, we measure it through the evaluation process. So we really are dedicating the Resident Engagement Institute to look at the social prescription process and how it can really help implement the opportunity for this research, this opportunity to see these outcomes and see how well we can impact both clinical and financial outcomes. So I'm going to talk with Alyssa. We're going to have a little chit chat back and forth here and talk a little bit about the standard of practice model. What are some things that play into it and how we can go about really bettering our process? And then we're going to give you some tools that can help you get started after that. Alyssa, welcome. Thank you again for being with us today. You are truly an amazing expert in this field, and I'm just so humbled and grateful to be doing this presentation with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stelter. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, so we're going to talk first about education and training because, you know, a lot of our individuals who are joining us today run these departments, or they help out their activity director or their life enrichment director in running the department. And so education and training is really important to success when it comes to be able to put all the pieces together, because it's not about just being in front of residents and providing good resident engagement. It's how do you function as a department and how do you keep things moving forward to be able to show how impactful you are with these outcomes and be successful. So when it comes to education and training requirements for activity and life enrichment directors, you know, state standards tend to vary. You know, what you're expected to do in Illinois is different from what you're expected to in California. So what's your opinion on varying levels of education and training and how this might impact being a leader in running departments and creating programs?
Yeah, so, Jennifer, you make a great point when you talked about the process of being clinically necessary. This is where that term competency comes into play. And I love the dictionary definition of competency. It talks about the quality of state or being competent, which obviously is like, okay, so what does it mean to be competent? But that is really looking at having that sufficient knowledge, that judgment, and that skill or strengths that you need to have in order to do your job. And that's why this definition is so vital to understand and recognize why we need to maintain professional competencies to do that. And as activity and life enrichment directors, we need to really look at those appropriate skills and that knowledge that's necessary for the services that we do provide. And then we need to take action so that we don't do any harm. So at the National Association of Activity Professionals, we did introduce a scope of practice. It's been around for almost 40 years. It's been updated, you know, to reflect current conditions, but we also need to be continually educating ourselves. That is what is so important about what the Activity Strong movement has done and what NAP does on a regular basis is to provide quality education that helps to look at those skills that are necessary to do that. And I'm not talking just your college experience or anything like that too, because that's the thing, you know, if we think about it, you know, I've been in the profession for a little over 30 years. And if I stuck with what skills I learned 30 years ago to lead an activity department, I would be really out of luck, right? We would not really be able to see how much time has changed. You know, I shared this before with some people that may be on today, but I said, you know, the MDS when I started was just the MDS, and now we're at MDS 3.0. So we really have to look at ways to improve ourselves. And we do that through attending the trainings that are provided for us, because those trainings offer opportunities to learn new innovations, to learn different skills, and to be able to take that back to your community where you work and make a difference. Because that is the thing, you know, we want to make a difference. We want to feel empowered. And that is the key to that, you know. And with the National Association of Activity Professionals, it is stated in FTAG 658 to look at professional quality standards. And I know we have this shift that we want to take, you know, of moving from activity director to life enrichment coordinator or that different title. But we have to, those of us that are especially in skilled nursing that follow the federal standards, we have to stick with that title of activity director because that's what's clearly stated. So we know what our position is. And I think that is important too when we talk about competency in education, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to even go above and beyond that too, I know early on in my career, my training is I'm a clinical psychologist, and in schooling, they don't teach you about leadership or management or anything like that. And so when I started to get into management myself, I said, I really should take some leadership classes here. And so I took it upon myself to go above and beyond my scope and even above and beyond my field to say, I need some brushing up. If I'm going to run departments, if I'm going to be managing people, I need to have a class on this. And so I ended up turning into a conference and things like that, which was the most beneficial thing for me as I continue to advance my career. So you're right, it's about going above and beyond and saying, how do I want my career path to look, and giving yourself the resource to be able to do that. And so investing in yourself really is what's important here to advance yourself and to really make a difference. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
wonderful. We're going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about the assessment process, right? Because that's the first level of the API process, right? So how might activity and life enrichment directors consider residents' diagnoses, symptoms, and functioning levels in planning activities?
I think, again, it goes back to competencies. We need to recognize and understand what the diagnoses are, first of all. So if we don't understand a certain diagnosis, we may need to look it up and learn a little bit more about it so that we can be prepared to focus on that. And definitely through that assessment process comes what we call the care plan. And that is the vital aspect of understanding what functions we want to do with that particular resident, that individual. And there's a lot of barriers that may impact participation. There's a lot of barriers that may work against not just the resident, but against the staff in being able to assist the individual in achieving that goal. So the activity assessment, of course, is that starting point. And we really have to look at that way to look at the human being as an individual. We have to move away from what their diagnoses are. We have to move away from maybe, what we've learned about them from other individuals. We have to get to know them as an effective human being. And I can remember, 20 years ago when I had the opportunity to assess a brand new resident that moved into our community who was only 21 years old and had a diagnosis of Rett syndrome. And that was challenging because nobody in our community knew what Rett syndrome was. And so I had to, make a trip to the library because we didn't have Google as strong as we do today. And I had to check out some books and resources on the diagnoses and then determine, what activities worked for other individuals with that same diagnosis. And the neat thing about that was we learned a lot about this individual through study, through gaining more knowledge, and through gaining more skills to be able to assist this individual to have a quality of life. And I think that is really important too. And one of the things that I was able to do with that then is I was able to take that and provide training to the nursing staff and to educate them on how to work with this particular individual, what worked and what didn't. And it was trial and error. It always is trial and error with anybody, but we were able to create a wonderful environment for this individual to have the most quality of life that they could in that phase of their life too, with a diagnosis that a lot of people weren't familiar with. Yeah.
So what you're saying essentially is, above and beyond, what we're typically assessing preferences, we're typically assessing likes and dislikes, may get in obviously spirituality, those kinds of things. But above and beyond that, we do have to look at their diagnoses, their symptoms, how they function overall, right? But don't stop there. It's more looking further into how to best manage or treat individuals who have these same symptoms and diagnoses, but then getting to know how it works with that particular individual, right?
Yes, of course.
Totally. Yeah, I remember I had a resident had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was consulting with a company, and the individual himself walked around, was very angry all the time, and he had angry outbursts, and it was really hard to engage him in group activities. And so I went in, I did a training on post-traumatic stress disorder, and we talked about how those symptoms, because he was diagnosed with that, how those symptoms are impacting him individually. And he didn't do well in group activities. He didn't do well with loud noises and lots of people and bright lights. He was triggered constantly, and he was irritable all the time. And so once we found out what worked for him based on his diagnoses and what he preferred, we were able to change up his activity plan to be more person-centered and to really support what he needed. And it really changed his mood. We actually increased and elevated his mood, where it was impacting and showing that on his depression scale. So his depression score was lower, which was great. So yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about this aspect of researching into things, right? Because that's really a part of the planning process, which is the second phase. We want to talk about how does our research play into our clinical knowledge and how we are providing care. So what is the value of using empirical research or evidence-based practices when planning, conducting activities? And what are some resources you might have for some of our directors online or some staff online who want to learn more about how to use research or evidence-based practices in their care?
So, as an activity life enrichment professional, we really have to have a pulse on that resident's individual preferences and their needs. Obviously, that starts with the assessment and the care plan, but then we also need to have some form of participation data to back up the services that we're providing that are going to validate what we're doing. And that, we look at observation periods, maybe we look at how we can evaluate and assess any holes that we find in our scheduling and our programming. Maybe we look at how the activities are participated in, what's the general interest of what's going on. Many times we focus maybe on a quality assurance report of some sort, where we can look at things. And I know that can be really challenging for us to come up with ideas of what to trigger or what to research on. And, a lot of times that quality assurance report can show data specific to your community that's going to help you with that evidence-based practice. And, we need to learn so much from that. We need to learn from that and grow with that. And there's a lot of resources that are available on the NAP website. I know Link Senior, the Resident Engagement Institute, we're looking at all of these ways to really bring quality research that's going to help us improve how we deliver the care that we are delivering. And, I think it's really important too that we look at the fact that residents that we're dealing with, or our patients, our guests, they're individuals. I heard that a lot in our previous session from the ladies before, that everybody's an individual. What may work for one may not work for another, but it is nice to have that research available to say, well, this is what's been done here. Let's try it in our community and see if we can make a difference. Yeah,
absolutely. When you were talking, I was thinking about a situation that had occurred during a annual public health survey of where I was consulting at a different facility. And they actually, the staff were doing a wonderful job using Montessori techniques that, Cameron Camp had researched into and developed and published, using different kinds of supplies and things like that. The residents were very engaged, but public health had a problem with the approach because they saw it as, you're just playing with them, you're treating them like children. And when I observed, I didn't see that at all, honestly. And so with that said, I was quick to whip out the studies that Cameron Camp had done and show them all of the literature on his approach, and they were quiet very quickly. And of course, we were then deficiency free, which is wonderful. So it is important to use the empirical research. And then from there, you implement it best for your organization, and then individually per person, how that's going to work. And then of course, we're talking about data, we're talking about doing research. And so research it, measure it to see, is it working for you? Is it working for the organization? Is it working for that person, right? And from there, you can show, to public health or maybe to owners and operators that look at this investment that we put in and look at the data that we're producing here to show these beautiful clinical and financial outcomes, which is great. We're going to actually put up a poll here for this next question that I'm going to ask Alyssa. A little bit different than what I'm going to ask Alyssa, but the question is, how much do you feel social prescription can drive quality resident engagement? So if you can answer that, and we're going to go to the polls after Alyssa gives her answer, but I'm going to ask Alyssa a little bit more specifically, dive into social prescription, which of course is the social prescription is developed in the planning component, but then when we implement it, right, we're going to implement that social prescription plan. So Alyssa, when we uphold preferences, what do you think are the benefits about setting benchmarks? Like, for example, minutes per resident per day, right? How much should I engage my resident based on empirical research, what we just talked about, that matches their functioning level, right? If they're low, moderate, or high. And this is really the social prescription plan. What do you think are the benefits of something like that?
Well, there's so many different benefits, but what I really feel like we need to look at is the residents' needs, and they're going to vary from day to day. And that's why the research is going to be helpful in understanding that and recognizing that a little bit more. Because the needs are going to vary every day, it's going to be dealing with their varied functional level for that day. We all have good days, we all have bad days. Some days we just don't want to get up and get dressed, right? Or we want to binge watch whatever television show we're looking at for that time. And so we have to be respectful of our residents too. And really looking at that, we have to work on not putting that cap on quality. Yes, there's going to be benchmarks that we want to set and times that we want to do, but some days it's going to be a little bit more time. And I love social prescription for that, because it reminds us how quality of life is so necessary for resident satisfaction. But the quality of time is going to be different with each individual. And that can be very challenging. As I've been watching the chat box roll through, we're departments of one. We have 60 plus residents, and that is really challenging to give that quality of time. And I think something that we've really learned since pandemic is that the group activities that we so relied on to engage multiple people at one point is not going to be as successful anymore. Not just because of pandemic, but because of, as we roll out of pandemic and as we welcome, a different generation of individuals into our communities, that's not going to be what those individuals want to do. So we really have to look at the individual residents and look at how this is going to impact the future of our profession. And it's going to take more staffing. We know that. It's going to take more. And that's where that competency comes into play. That's where that educational component comes into play. Doing surveys, doing time studies, doing different things that are going to help you to meet that need so that you can understand the needs of the residents, so that you can access their satisfaction on a daily basis through the interactions. And I think we need to move beyond that calendar of being filled with programs every single day. Gone are the days of 10 to 12 programs. We can't just put activities on a calendar to keep people busy. I think that is the biggest issue that we see. A lot of our administrators, CEOs, things like that, they like to see this calendar filled with a ton of things because then it looks like we're keeping busy. But our activity professionals can't keep up with that. That's not realistic. And I think we have to look at ways to be more realistic. Mm-hmm. And we do that. I had the experience years ago. I had one of the highest budgets in my community of all the communities that were in our corporation, because I took the time to do the research, because I took the time to study what we needed to have in our community. I was a 148 bed facility. We had 8 staff members. 4 of them were full-time, 4 were part-time. And every year when I would prepare for the budget meetings, which generally take place in the month of September, I would come prepared to meet with my administrator with my evidence stating why we needed to have more budget or more staffing. And it was time, we took the entire month of August, essentially, our department would, which is a slower month for activities, as we know. So we would be able to take that time to really focus on time management, time studies, looking at ways that we can determine, how are we going to enter the new year? What do we want to do differently? And a reason why we need to do this so early on in the year is because budgets are set. By the end of September, the budgets are set for the new year. So we have to look at ways to focus on how can I make improvements in my department? So this is the time to say, take ownership of that. You talked about leadership, looking at that ways, take leadership of your department and say, these are the things that we need to do to be successful. These are the things that we need to have in order to provide that quality engagement. And those are the things that we need to focus on. I know we think, well, I don't have time to do that, but you've got to make the time to do that in order to have a successful program and the services that you provide, for sure.
Absolutely. And I love that you shared your story about your personal experience and how you made it happen by, the data that you had at your fingertips and how you could present that on an annual basis to your leadership team there at the facility. And so I know I 100% agree with you. When we talk about individuals, they really need to be looked at on a day-to-day basis. Things can change for them. They might have good days, they might have bad days, and we specifically know that more in tune and intimately with people with dementia. And so we talk about how can we set benchmarks that's not going to set us up for failure, but how can it make us successful, so we can use, when we measure those benchmarks, right, and we try to meet those benchmarks, we can then produce that data on a regular basis. So part of it, we're talking about maybe on an average, so on daily, right? If you take an average for the week, are you meeting those benchmarks to the best of your ability? So, we talked about this in June when we started to talk about the Resident Engagement Institute, but Link Senior is really dedicated to try to set these benchmarks, and we need all of you, everybody, to help us to set those benchmarks to see what can we, work towards. And the first time we may get it absolutely wrong, and that's okay, right? This is a learning opportunity. Let's set those benchmarks together. Let's try to reach them as best as we can. Let's measure it. And if we get that data that's successful, that shows clinical and financial benefits to the company and to the residents, right? And overall, what we're trying to measure, this can really help us when it comes to not only, of course, proving that what we're doing is successful, that activities is clinically and financially necessary, not just nice to have, but also that it may increase your budget, that it may get you that more staffing that you're asking for, that you might have more money for events and holidays and resident gifts, right? All those kinds of things that we want more money for, it's going to be returned back to your department. So thank you for that as well. So let's go to the poll. I don't know, Megan, how to see. Oh, here we go. Megan, she's the one to do it. I love her. So it looks like when we say, how much do you feel social prescription can drive quality resident engagement? 23% said almost always, which is great. 60% said very likely, and 17% said somewhat likely, and nobody said not at all, which is awesome. So thank you so much for that. Very exciting data. So we're going to now move into our second poll. Oh, no, sorry, I have one more. In your opinion, Alyssa, how do you think resident engagement correlates with clinical outcomes? So I've been talking about it, preaching about it this last, since we started the presentation. How do you think it correlates with that?
It correlates 100%, right, Jennifer? It's directly related to these clinical outcomes. The best way that we have to measure this is continually assessing the residents' needs. And this can be challenging because I know many of us are really looking for that golden ticket, right? We're all looking for that end all be all way to really look at how we can end any kind of guidance. And it's challenging to hear how one activity life enrichment director is doing something and think it will work in your facility. We hear that often. Well, that's not going to work in my community. But that's why activity professionals need to look at their own research and need to focus on ways that they can meet the needs of the individuals that they're working with. And we worked with Link Senior a couple years back and talked about this topic of APIs that we're looking at here. And after we assess the individual needs of the residents in our communities, we then need to plan those individualized goals that are based on those needs. And really look at that, just like no two fingerprints are alike, no two residents are going to be alike. And that is something that we have to be mindful of as well. And after that goal has been planned and after the implementation has been carried through, then we need to share that. That is the most important thing we do. We could say we made this amazing care plan and we're so proud of it, but if it stays hidden in the electronic record and nobody has access to it, how are we going to be able to carry that out? So that is really that process to help others know what your plan is so that they can assist you in that process. So you're not alone in that. The federal regulation reads the facility must, not the activity director must. So we have to look at ways to really incorporate the entire facility into that process. And of course, that final step of evaluation can be done through those quality assurance performance improvement tools that we use, and then understanding exactly what that final goal is to recognize that the programming that we do provide plays that significant role. And that's how we go about marketing our communities. Let's be a part of that. We have to be the marketers. I know a lot of us are like, I'm seeing in the chat box all the different job responsibilities that we've been given. That's that proverbial all other duties as assigned. But when potential clients see exactly what you're providing based on that research, they're going to be anxious to join in the fun. And that is the thing, despite the fact of all the hardships and everything we're doing, it really is a lot of fun to do what we do. And I'm sure, we've all been stressful over these last 18 months, and it's been very challenging to find joy in what we do. And as we see the staffing shortages that have come across the entire continuum of care, it can be more challenging too, to not just put one activity on the calendar. We need to be realistic, and that is the most important thing we look at. If it's only one activity a day, then it's one activity a day. If it's just the opportunity so that you can go out and still do everything else that you've been asked to do, we really have to look at it in that way. And that is recognizing exactly the impact of what we do to meet the needs of the one. And we also need to recognize that we cannot do it alone. No matter how super heroic we may think we are, right? No matter how much we put our capes on every morning and stand in the Superman pose, it is going to need to take a community effort. We need to engage the entire community in this process. Each team member plays a significant role in ensuring that residents have overall satisfaction in their well-being.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yeah, so essentially you're saying the API process really does impact clinical outcomes, and we would learn that through the evaluation process when looking at each individual resident. So let's talk about how it can impact financial outcomes. So Megan's going to put up another poll here, and the question that Megan's going to put up is, do you think resident engagement can be proven as a return on investment? Yes or no? So I'm going to pose it a little bit differently to Alyssa here. What advice would you give activity and life enrichment directors in how to articulate that resident engagement does generate a return on investment when they need to meet with their administrators or executive directors and approach them and ask for more staff or ask for an increase in their budget? How should they go about doing that? What would you recommend?
Best thing we can do is complete that research. Use those quality reports. Do you know there's over 81 critical element pathways that you can utilize that are available to everybody? This is what the surveyors come in and do. Use those parts to do that and show how your activities that you provide have helped to decrease the behaviors or the satisfaction with your daily routines. And you don't have to be a statistician to do this. You can provide a good report to your administrators or your executive directors on that return on investment. Show everything that you're doing has a therapeutic value, has a therapeutic outcome of what you're providing. And I think it's really important too that you access those critical element pathways. They can be used, doesn't matter what level of care you work with. They are a great resource that's available to utilize. And you can even redevelop them or reconfigure them to meet the specific needs of the population that you work with. Obviously, another great resource is that Preferences of Everyday Living, the Peli instrument that is around. That's a very great tool that's available because that can help you look at that quality assurance and know significantly what you want to focus on. The key term here is documentation. That is the most important thing that you can do as an activity life enrichment professional. If you didn't document it, you didn't do it. That's where research comes into play too. And our senior leaders need to see on paper why and what the return of an investment is. And since activities is not included in the reimbursement plan, we know that activities is sometimes thought of as an afterthought or, the low man on the totem pole. So we really have to be mindful of that and how we provide that meaningful engagement. We know it's not an afterthought at all. We know we're a priority. We know quality of life is what quality of care should be. And this is where education becomes vital. So it's kind of like this full circle. Activity professionals need to feel empowered to promote what they do. And it's okay to toot your own horn, so to speak. I love that. And Dawn Worsley, who's going to be hosting our cocktail hour later today, which will be at 1:00 my time. That's the best time to have a cocktail, right? She says that resident engagement has to take a center stage and help to redefine quality of life. And going forward as activity and life enrichment professionals, we are going to be the driving force that ensures all direct support staff and the interdisciplinary team possesses the skills to provide the necessary engagement. So the bottom line is activity and life enrichment directors need to take time for education and understand their competencies that are available to them so that they can do the best job that they can.
Absolutely. And then when they can prove that what they're doing is quality, that rolls into a return on investment, right? Because it impacts their star ratings, it impacts their referrals, it impacts their satisfaction. I mean, all these things that then we see that return on investment that owners and operators really want to look at to make sure that they're running a smart business, right?
100%.
Alyssa,
yes.
Yeah. Alyssa, this was wonderful. Oh, let's go to that poll to see what that answer was. So do you think resident engagement provides a return on investment? 99% said yes. Yes. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. All right, so we're going to go back to the slides. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving some great advice and guidance to our activity professionals of the world. We appreciate it. So
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. Appreciate
yes,
it.
absolutely. All right. Oop, let me go ahead and advance through here. Okay, so I promised you that we would share some tools that we have available to you to get this process started, right? So again, we know that you're doing the API process. We just want to be able to make it standardized. We want to be able to measure it to see, is this going to impact our clinical and financial outcomes? So we are introducing to you a new tool called the EPI tool, Elder Engagement Performance Improvement Tool. If you were familiar with Charles's Rice study a couple of years ago, he looked at how departments operate within organizations, activity departments operate within organizations, and how does that impact the bottom line, right? And so this is an advanced version of that. We want to continue conducting research, and so this is a way to get started. So this tool is a self-inventory tool to assess and set goals to improve how senior living providers deliver the experience residents want and deserve, right? It is really looking at how organizations are implementing that API process we talked about, right? So you can see where you're at with it and then take it over time as you implement these things that Alyssa's talking about here. And as we're going to share with you through Resident Engagement Institute ongoing, as you're implementing those things, you can reassess yourself to see if you're improving, right? That's data in of itself that you can show to your administrator, your executive director, your CEO to say, hey, look at how we're improving, and comparing that to your clinical and financial outcomes, right? So what the EPI tool is essentially is a QAPI tool for your activity department, right? Looking at this API process. It was rooted in research, and it was developed, with a plethora of people. If you go to the website that I have here, you can see all the wonderful experts that helped us build this tool. So thank you to everybody who contributed. The objective is to retake this tool over time to see how you're improving. So it's live now. We recommend that you go on, you take it. A couple of follow-up things. If you, when you take it, we're going to be sending your results to you via email. So you understand within each part of the API process and total amount, right, at the end, how are you doing in each of those areas as well as overall. And then if you complete this tool before the end of October, we're going to be offering free exclusive resident engagement coaching sessions with myself in November. So we're going to invite you to these group seminars to be able to show you how to improve each area of the API process. So you can go back, you can implement it, pulling a lot of what Alyssa said and what we're going to be formulating through the Resident Engagement Institute, right? And then allowing that, for you to be able to take those and improve your process. And then you could take the EPI tool again to see how you're doing. So part of this really is when we talk about this API process, another resource and tool we have for you is we are working really, really hard with our engineering team to incorporate in a more standardized way the API process within the new platform of Link Senior, which will be launched next year. So I mentioned a little bit about it during the June summit, but want to kind of talk about it again in the fact that the API process, we're building that in to the Link Senior platform. So as a activity professional, you'll be able to go through each tab, assess, plan, implement, evaluate, and see how your organization, your company, your facility is doing as a whole, as well as looking at each individual resident if you are doing our program tracking subscription. So this will help institute the social prescription. So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to take that assessment information that's implemented into the platform. We're going to be able to generate that social prescription for you. So you'll be able to know how much should I engage my resident and with what, right? Based on preferences and likes and dislikes, and help you really plan out that person's individualized plan. Then you can implement it through the Link Senior platform, and then we collect the data to see how they're doing. And we're going to be able to pull in some of these great clinical outcomes to see if they have improved with falls and psychotropic use and those kinds of things that we want to shoot for. Overall, showing that, of course, that activities is clinically and financially necessary to an organization's success, right? That's what a smarter business is, right? We want to be able to help you be more efficient and more effective at what you're doing. And we're hoping with the new Link Senior platform here in 2022 that we can help do that with you. So I'm open for questions. So if you have any questions, I know Megan or Charles can check the chat box. While they're doing that though, we do have an announcement, our next announcements about the Resident Engagement Institute. We are excited to announce who our faculty are going to be. Now, before I get to that slide, I want to talk about faculty, right? So a big piece of our institute is the research component that we'll be doing, but we'll be partnering with some of our faculty to continue that research over time. But another piece of what the faculty will be contributing to the Engagement Institute is offering consultation services to you, right? So more to come on that. Each of these faculty have their own niche and their own research into how they can help you. So with that said, they'll be available for that. And they'll also be contributing to some publications and some other wonderful things that we'll be doing through the Resident Engagement Institute starting here in 2022. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the faculty and then we'll get to your questions, right? Are you guys excited? Drum roll, please. I need a drum. I don't have one, but that's okay. So with that said, our faculty, Charles is controlling it, so I cannot turn it to that. So my drum roll has flattened. There we go. Okay, thank you, Charles. So this is our resident engagement faculty that we are introducing today. So excited. You can see all these wonderful experts in the field joining us. Rochelle Blau, we've got Cameron Camp, we've got Vicki the Clerk, we've got Robert Espinoza, Emmy Quixote, Jessica Ryan, myself, David Truxell, and Kay Van Norman. We are so excited to be working with these individuals and more to come on how they'll be partnering with us. So thank you very much. So Charles, any questions that we have?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Stelter. This was an amazing presentation. We did have a number of questions, but just in the time, I think that one came up several times, which is how do you suggest, measuring length of stay? Because it seems to be one of the, it's a quality measure, but obviously it's a business measure. And any thoughts on that before we get into wrapping up this session?
Absolutely. So it is a little intricate in that there is a calculation that we put together in partnering with one of our product advisory board members. And so if you can contact me, I can give you some more information around that because it is a little bit more intricate on the calculation of that. But it certainly is possible to be able to project length of stay based on quality outcomes. But also, if you're looking at kind of the, looking backwards into proving length of stay, you can take a look at when people were admitted versus when they were discharged and do an average for the month of their days that they were in the facility and look at timestamps, right? So when was it, let's say if you want to measure from earlier in the year to now, you will look to see if those numbers of days have increased. So that would be looking at past data. But if you want to project based on quality outcomes, we can talk about an intricate calculation that you can do that will help you to show that as well. So there's past and then there's future.
Thank you so much. Dr. Stelter, you mentioned contacting you. I want to share with the audience your emails, both you, Dr. Stelter, and Alyssa's contacts. And I want to take the time to recognize, Dr. Stelter, that you work for an amazing company, and obviously I'm biased because you work for Link Senior. But I think that beyond that, what I'm trying to say, and I truly mean it, obviously, since I've met you and you worked for another organization, I've always been amazed by, your passion, your innovation, but also your, this idea of not settling, and on one hand, respecting what we've all been doing for years, but also continuously thinking about what's next. And this is also a comment that I want to share with Alyssa. So Alyssa, I don't know if you want to come back on the video for just a couple of minutes. But Alyssa, I want to take also the time to, just thank you for the amazing work that you personally do for the field of activities. You work with an amazing organization, NAP, And every person that I know at NAP is really passionate, obviously, by the field of activities. And I want to share with the audience that NAP is one of these leading organizations that have made, for most of us, if not all of us, going through this pandemic easier, right? Think of us going through the pandemic without NAP. And I think this would have been, on one hand, maybe slightly more painful, or sometimes for some of us, impossible, right? Because NAP has always been there, continuously driving, helping, reconfirming, and so on. So, I do want to mention something that Alyssa was saying, which is in a community, we can't do it alone. And that's true, we can't. But I think that we need to also look at it at a higher level, which is that Link Senior, we are extremely passionate about elevating resident engagement, but we can't do it alone. We simply cannot. And it's only in partnering with amazing organizations like NAP that we can truly think about, bringing this idea of the social prescription and a better world for activities quicker. And one last thought, and again, that's an invitation for all of you in the audience. We simply need more activity directors. A better world for us is more activity directors. And it's us as professionals, but in the end, what also really matters is our elders, right? It is a better world for our elders if there are more activity directors. So please consider NAP as a partner for you and your organization to achieve that. And that's all I wanted to say. There's a great thought at our summit, and Alyssa and Dr. Stelter kind of went on to it a little bit. Engagement is as good or sometimes better than medicine. And that is the future, and that is what we're looking to all build together. So again, Dr. Stelter, thank you very much for your time and your presentation. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining. As always, your leadership is inspirational, and it was wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
Anytime. So just a quick reminder, Dr. Stelter announced the Resident Engagement Institute. I do want to take the time personally also to thank everybody that's joined us on this faculty. So on this slide, we have Rachel Blau. I don't know if she's online, but Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Kemp also, but all of the other wonderful faculty members that you can see on our website that we're launching today. Please, thank you for helping us define the future and helping us for joining us in our vision and mission. Dr. Stelter mentioned the EPI tool. Very excited to bring this to all of us. One thing that Dr. Stelter didn't mention is that it's free. It's absolutely free, and we're doing this in order for us to help elevate the field of resident engagement. And this can be done anytime you want and taken anytime you want, with one idea that if you do it again by, I think, the end of October, we will do this free coaching sessions with you. And one last thing about this data analysis, we did it last year with this idea of putting data around resident engagement, and we did find amazing outcomes. All of these can be found on our website, but this is kind of an excerpt of our white paper that was published earlier this year. The idea is to take this, make it better, and again, help us build the resident engagement that we want and that our residents deserve. So with that being said, we're going to close this session by closing the recording, and take a minute